Hello and a warm welcome to Wellness with Will. Thank you so much for joining us today here on INX Prime. Our guest today is Zola Chonco, who is a social worker and mental health activist. She's here to help you and I overcome procrastination. Every year, without fail, many people around the world set what we call or commonly refer to as New Year's resolutions. But when the year starts, we fall off the proverbial wagon. Some people 3 weeks in, some people 3 months in, which means there's a level of commitment that they had put in place, right? The will is there, so to speak. Zola, warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start right there. When we talk about overcoming procrastination, it sounds like it's a lot easier when you say it, but it's a lot harder to do it in real time.
Thank you for having me, Will. And yes, you're correct. It is easier said than done. And I think most of the time it's because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Sure.
And we expect ourselves to do 100 times more in such a short space of time. So you're also giving yourself a limited amount of time to do these tasks.
Right.
And then that just paralyzes you. And
Sure.
most times people who talk about procrastination will tell you, I just can't seem to get started. It's not even about finishing the task.
Right.
It's about starting the task.
And where do we find that will, that oomph, if you will, to get us going? What's the first step?
Well, the first step is to start. I used to hate it when people would say, just start. But I think that is the most best advice anybody can give you is to
Sure.
just start. But it's also to be kind to yourself and give yourself some grace.
Okay.
We're always so hard on ourselves. We have to always do things a certain way because I have to impress or I have to do this. And I think that comes with a lot of pressure, and we need to lessen and remove the pressure from ourselves in order for us to be able to feel comfortable enough to start and make the mistakes.
And I imagine, Zola, a lot of that pressure comes from within, right? It's pressure that we put on ourselves because we are wanting feedback from the outside. Problem number one, I imagine. But from your expert social work experience, what have you found to be the case for a lot of people, and how have you helped them?
So I think, yes, internal pressure is one of the most common causes of procrastination, but also external pressures from family,
Sure.
friends, community at large. I think we feel that there's a big expectation on ourselves to perform.
Right.
And to perform in a certain way at a certain level.
Sure.
But that's also your feelings. Unless somebody has explicitly said to you, this is what I'm expecting from you.
Right.
Then everything else is all in your mind. It's all something that you have put on yourself. And I think we need to understand that when you are faced with a task, you need to be able to sit down and understand what is the task requiring of me.
Right.
Outside of anybody else, outside of who might say what or who might think what am I requiring for myself in order for me to complete this task?
And I guess in the same breath, it's very important for us to now just unpack what procrastinating actually is, so that you can recognize it for yourself or see it when you are in it, right? Because a lot of the times people who find themselves procrastinating aren't even aware that it's happening.
Yes, that is so true. So procrastination, to put it simply, is putting off tasks because of a belief that you need it to be a certain way, or a belief that you're not worthy or you can't perform. Oftentimes we are putting pressure to make it perfect.
Right.
So in struggling with procrastination, you're struggling with perfection.
Okay.
So perfectionists usually are procrastinators. And the other thing is, there's this thing they say is, I can only do the task when I have a day in order to complete the task. Or if it's a submission,
right,
you need to do it last minute, and that's where you have the drive and all the creativity. And that's problematic because it's stressful, and the amount of time that you keep thinking about it, that you keep worrying about it,
right,
is what's playing towards that negative mental health.
I get you.
Yes.
I get you. And what would be then the solution, Zola, for us firstly to avoid that pitfall of procrastinating? And if we find ourselves in it, how do we get out of it, right? Yes, some people prefer working under pressure, and at times you're not very efficient because you are working under pressure.
So firstly, like I mentioned before, is to be kind to yourself. So in all that you do, understand that it is a journey.
Right.
It's not a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Sure.
It's a journey. And that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. Those are things we need to keep in mind when we're faced with a task and we're thinking, oh my gosh, it needs to be perfect. I can't fail. No, it doesn't need to be perfect. You can fail. Fail is part of growth. If you don't fail, you never grow. So you need to fail in order for you to grow. So I think we need to put that in mind first.
Okay.
And then you need to set goals. You need to set smart goals, goals that have a clear understanding of what am I trying to get out of this.
Okay.
So you need to be able to be clear about your goals and as well as set boundaries for yourself.
Okay.
Where you are saying, I'm not going to be doing this in order for me to be able to get an outcome that I'm looking for.
Right.
So it's about you being intentional about the things that you're doing, where you are thinking about what you're about to do, planning for it, and in that way you're able to then mitigate any issues that come. Because when you wait for the last minute, if there are issues, you can't really mitigate those issues. You have to deal with what you get.
Right.
But had you started weeks before, you would have been able to have enough time to then deal with the issues that arise. So I think procrastination is so tricky to deal with when you have someone who's functioned with it for a long time.
Right. And let's talk about those timelines, Zola, because a lot of the times the reason perfectionists procrastinate is because they're waiting for the time for things to all be, or to have all their ducks in a row, so to speak, right? What's the realistic timeline that one can set for themselves to say, here's a task that I'd like to achieve, and is it a good idea, mentally speaking, to set yourself a timeline or a deadline? Will that not cause you anxieties in the end? Just from your expert opinion, please help us unpack that, because it seems like different sides of the same coin.
Yes, you are correct. So I want to share a story about myself where I was on a health journey.
Okay.
Like we're all our beginning of the year.
Yes.
I'm gonna go to gym. I'm gonna do this.
Right.
And I think for many years, I've been doing the same thing where I'm gonna start in Jan and I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna, slim down, be fit.
Okay.
And come January, maybe I'll go 2 times, and then life happens and I'm not going.
Sure.
And I found that my problem is, firstly, I want to do this exercise or fitness journey the same way that other people have done it.
Okay.
So we need to understand that we're individuals.
Right.
And we won't do the things the same way as our neighbor or our friend.
Sure.
So we need to be conscious of the fact that I am me. And so I need to find things that work for me.
Okay.
And
so pacing ourselves.
Pace yourself.
Right.
Allow yourself the space to figure it out for yourself, because we have the big dream. We have the idea of how to get to the dream. But we don't realize that to get to those little steps, you need to take baby steps. It doesn't just happen. It's not an overnight thing where tomorrow now you're this great accountant. You have to go to school, you have to pass, you have to go to varsity, you have to have an internship. There's so many steps to it, and we have to allow ourselves to go through those steps. But because we're in such a hurry because of the dream, and the dream is okay, the dream is good.
Right.
We encourage dreaming, but we shouldn't allow the dream and the outcome of the dream to become an hindrance to the now and how we then move forward.
I get that.
So basically, just to give you, a little wrap up of how my story ended.
Sure.
I just did it. So I just started. It was December last year, and I just started running.
Okay.
And I've been running since. So I run about 3 times a week, and I found that I need to stay at my own pace. Do it at my pace.
Right.
Because if you go into the runner's world, you realize that people are doing 5 minutes per kilometer, and you're like, I'm doing 10. Like, I'm slow.
Right.
But it's okay.
But that's okay.
That is okay. That's where you are. They started somewhere. They started at 10 or 15.
Sure.
You can't compare yourself to somebody. You need to compare yourself to yourself. So I started at 12, and now I'm at 10, sometimes 9. But there's improvement.
Right.
But I wouldn't know that unless I started and I'd given myself the chance to fail.
And we'll talk about the importance of recognizing when you made the change in your life and there is an improvement, because some people then start and forget to acknowledge the little work, the small steps that they've taken. But firstly, I want to talk about the family dynamics. If you are a parent or just a family member and you're recognizing that perhaps this person is procrastinating, or they've come to you to open up and communicate that I've got this task that I need to get done, I cannot seem to get started. How do you deal with those relationships, and how do you maneuver around those very delicate, sometimes sensitive conversations?
So I think firstly, if somebody does come to you, that's an honor, that's a privilege, that's somebody who's trusting you with something that for them is really big and hard to do. So we need to acknowledge that. We need to make them feel seen and heard and understood.
Sure.
And then we need to be practical. So
Right.
you need to work out, how are you then spending your time? So we need to do a needs assessment.
Okay.
And see where the problem is. We need to identify the problem. Yes, we understand you're procrastinating, but why and how are you procrastinating?
Right.
And then once we figured that out, then we work out how then do we find solutions? How
Okay.
then do we use your time in such a way that you are productive at the end of the day? Because oftentimes it's not that we don't have the time, we just don't know how to manage our time. So you want to help the person manage the time that they do have.
Okay.
And so you do that by writing out a schedule, figuring out where are the things that they cannot move. So there's certain things like going to work or going to school that you cannot do anything about.
It
because
must happen.
It must happen. So
Right.
those are things that are set in stone.
Sure.
Then there are things that you do because we need to go to the gym. So I know on Monday afternoon I must go to the gym. That's something I don't want to move, that I don't want to compromise on.
Okay.
That's a time that I've set aside for that.
Sure.
At least once a week.
Right.
And then we have other times to play around with where, okay, so Saturday afternoon, what are you doing Saturday after? Well, I mean, I'm just chilling, which is good. But are you chilling all morning, afternoon, night? You can't, you need to find a time where, okay, I can be productive.
Right.
So you try and help the person work out where can they find this productivity. And then you do it bit by bit. So now that I found out that Saturday afternoon is free, you can't expect me to sit 3 hours Saturday afternoon doing my work.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
we need to start small. So 20 minutes. And that's another thing about procrastination is by the time I come to you, I'm already stretched. Like my deadline is in a week. I don't have time to start small.
Sure.
But you have to give yourself that, because you can't do big. We've seen that you can't do big. You have to work towards it. So you need to be patient.
I get that. And would then that same ideology apply in a work environment? You're now the leader or the boss, if you will, or manager of a department. You are recognizing that some of your subordinates or people that work for you aren't necessarily pulling their weight. You know they're talented, you know they've got the skill, that's why you hired them, but they don't necessarily deliver on time. And, you know, you don't want to get HR in because obviously if we've hired you for this task and you're not delivering, you're not meeting parts of your contract, therefore we could find grounds to let you go. But you don't want things to go to that extent. How do you then, as a leader, help those individuals out who are in your environment, in your workspace?
Okay, thank you for that question. So outside of the things that I mentioned, I think when somebody is procrastinating or struggling,
Sure.
we need, especially in a workspace,
Right.
we need to acknowledge that we are human and that we, as adults, have families, we have friends, we have all sorts of dynamics outside of the workspace. And when one of those areas are affected, that will inadvertently affect your work. So as a leader, you need to establish where the issue is.
Right.
How can we support you?
Sure.
Because I think that's all people really need. They need a little bit of compassion,
Right.
a little bit of empathy.
Sure.
And that makes them feel good enough to be able to speak out and say, I have a problem. And also then trust that when they do say they have a problem, they'll be supported, and that way they'll be able to carry out their tasks.
So the leader would, in essence, need to also be someone who's mentally healthy to understand how to even approach things in that way.
Yes, I think it's very important for leaders in themselves to be mentally healthy.
Right.
Because your subordinates, they draw from you.
Right.
And if you're not in a stable state, that trickles down into those below you. So it is very important for a leader to be able to manage their subordinates' feelings,
Right.
and also to understand that as humans, we're not perfect.
Sure.
And we will definitely, as an adult, guys, we go through a lot.
This is true.
In one day,
This is true.
you can say, wow, I can't believe I survived this day. And that could be 3 days out of a week. So you can imagine how that person is feeling when they come to you to say, I'm not doing okay. Then you need to have a little bit of, and I think a lot of people just struggle to come forward at work because of the fear that, oh, you're struggling, therefore you can't do your job. Well, we can't help you, we can't use you, you know.
Right.
So it is very important for leaders to have compassion, to have understanding, because that will 100% of the time deal with the procrastination.
I love that. On that note, Zola, where do we find you? How do we reach out to you? I know you do a lot of social work, but you are a very active mental health practitioner. If we are having problems within our own family environments, perhaps even at work, and we're not finding outlets for us to speak to people or colleagues, can we reach out to you? How do we do that?
Definitely. So I am on Instagram, mama_wa_azania.
Okay.
I think I need to work on my handle. I'm on Instagram, Zola Chonco, as well as LinkedIn.
Sure.
I think that's a nice platform to reach out to me.
Right.
And then also email, zola.chonco@gmail.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Zola.
Thank you for having me. This has been such a great experience for me. I really appreciate you inviting me here. Thank you.
Zola Chonco is a social worker and mental health practitioner who's giving you practical tips that you can right now, as of this moment, put into practice and change your life. Thanks for watching.